All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another of the 2022 builds refreshes. Today we get to talk about SARYN, who is, you guessed it, still absolutely amazing. And I'll be honest, today the build I'm going to show you is going to look weird, but I promise you it works exceedingly well. Today, we are talking about Gloomy SARYN, but there are a few different things here that are happening, and this is a tank build. So this is a tank build in that Gloom gives us lifesteal, and if enemies cannot do all of our EHP in a single hit, we cannot die, because our 1 is going to constantly be hurting enemies, as Spores does, and with the lifesteal from Gloom, it is going to fully heal us on every single tick. So if we cannot die in exactly 1 hit, we won't die. And if our shields are up, it's going to take 2 hits. And they both have to be sizable enough to kill us. In fact, the first one can be any size because we'll have a shield gate. So this build uses Umbral Vitality and Umbral Intensify. And if you were using Arcane Energize, you could go 2 steps further for 6 Forma, including 1 Umbral Forma, and instead of Hunter Adrenaline, you could run Umbral Fiber for not only more strength, but also considerably more total EHP. The reason I have not done that is because it is wildly unnecessary to do. There is no realm where you need to do that. In the Steel Path, this absolutely shreds, and you are pretty much never under threat as long as Gloom is up and your spores are on some dudes. And of course, this does an outrageously large amount of damage because we're doing Toxic Lash with spores infecting the entire map and using our MIASMA to extend that range and continue to breed the disease that is SARYN. She is exceedingly powerful. She is one of the best DPSs in the game. She can DPS everything that she can see and more and better in an absolutely absurd range. One of the other things you could swap out if you're using Arcane Energize or Hunter Adrenaline is you could go stretch and do absolute maximized range on this build if you really want to reach out and poison someone. So you could do that, but that's also completely unnecessary because honestly, maps aren't that big in terms of where you're going to be DPSing, and this much range is honestly phenomenal. The radius is great, and increasing the range that you're killing dudes at is more so going to make it so that you have to walk farther to pick up drops then it's going to kill more people. So it's a really, really good build. Hunter Adrenaline is nice even with Arcane Energize, because this basically just means infinite energy. Enemies are going to shoot you. You are going to get energy for it. And of course, we have Prime Flow, so we have a very large energy cap for filling up with either Hunter Adrenaline or Arcane Energize. I will note that you do want efficiency instead of Hunter Adrenaline for doing ESO usually. And the reason for that is because enemies probably are not going to live long enough to shoot you in ESO because they're just so much considerably weaker than they are in the Steel Path. With that, though, your other option, if you do want them to be able to shoot you a little bit, which is actually probably the easier solution, is just to remove Molt Augmented. So this is a free 60% ability strength, putting us at 210% strength. That is not only exceedingly good for Gloom for an even higher slow, but also the amount of damage that means that we're ticking up to and doing is pretty outrageous. And it helps keep us in Steel Path at a level of enemies that are weak and would annoy us just dying, and the enemies that are strong and survivable, like the Eximus, living just long enough to wait for the new wave of weak enemies to die, and then they poison all of them, who in turn die and infect the new Eximus, and so on and so forth, and the waves of death continue. That is SARYN. So SARYN is an incredibly effective playstyle, and one of the problems SARYN can run into, which you'll see on the Steel Path run, is that I can be killing too fast. Your goal is not to kill too fast. Your goal is to kill just enough enemies that there are still enemies on the map that are primed for your 1. What I mean by that is a couple things. We're going to pause the AI here to talk about this because it's important to the way that SARYN works. So you can take your 1, and I'm going to put it on this enemy because they'll live for a while. And this is constantly going to tick up damage in the bottom right. This will tick up faster and faster as you get more hosts, up to 10. So once you're at 10, this is going to scale pretty much as fast as it's going to scale. That's good because if this gets too high, you are going to kill all of your hosts, and you need them. When this enemy dies, because they were the enemy I cast my 1 on, they will spread my 1 to all the enemies within the range around them. So, in order to make that happen, we're going to throw the 1 on this guy, because he'll actually die in a reasonable amount of time, and you can see this starting to tick faster. And you can see this guy's level 190, and on 2 infected, he's going to die, because he's one of, like, you know, the weaker enemies, and this is one of the stronger enemies, and their health bar is barely moving, if at all. So this guy will die first, infecting everyone else. So this is the rest of the 19 of them, and you can see our scaling start to tick up and up and up and up. Now, all these enemies that just got infected that are not this one that I cast my 1 on, when they die, they will not spread my 1. So that keeps it from being an infinite loop all by itself. However, if you catch these enemies with your 4, which does relatively inconsequential damage, what your 4 is actually doing to these enemies is it's turning them into enemies that act as if you had cast your 1 on them directly. What that means is that at really large ranges, because your 4 has very high range, you can turn a bunch of enemies into hosts, and then when those hosts die, they create more infected. So the range of your 4 is more so determined to be how many enemies you're going to, like, prime to kill, and then those enemies die, and then the enemies outside of your 4's range get infected, and then those enemies die, and so on and so forth. And as new waves of enemies reappear, as you can see, these much tougher enemies would survive, and the weaker enemies would fill in. Whenever the tough enemies would begin to fall off and be hosts, they would infect the weaker enemies, which then all die, and so on and so forth. And this number, obviously, will go higher and higher and higher, up to the point where it'll start doing that fairly instantly, and really taking care of a lot of enemies. As you can see, this enemy finally died, but the other ones that were infected later, there's a lot of timers to think about and manage. Now, of course, you can always just spread this with your 3 and using any gun or weapon or anything in order to hit enemies. So if I just, like, fill this back in, I can use my 3 and just shoot this, and now all these enemies are infected because I shot an enemy while my 3 was active. A weapon like the Ignis is very good at spreading this out and just, like, you know, causing this wave of kill. You can see the weak enemies dying first and the stronger enemies, you know, taking longer, and so on and so forth. And all of this is supported by, in terms of getting all your survivability from Gloom. When you get all your survivability from Gloom, basically what that means is that you can't die and enemies have a hard time shooting you anyway. So you can either kind of lazily just run around the mission because it's, you know, if you're at a point where enemies can't kill you yet, or alternatively, you can do like your usual, like, run and jump around, and with enemies slowed, they're basically going to be unable to deal with you. But yeah, as you can see, whenever everything runs out, you start decaying, and you start decaying at a pretty incredible rate. But the decay is slow enough that you can re-host an enemy and then continue to build back up should everything fall off. So what SARYN does is not really active killing of everyone. What SARYN's job is to garden and make sure that every enemy on the map has spores. Because if every enemy on the map has spores, it means every enemy on the map is going to die, one way or another. So let's do this without them having their AI turned off for the purposes of education. The run in the Steel Path is going to make that a lot more, you know, obvious as to what's occurring, because you have those waves and waves of enemies spawning, and, like, you know, it works with, like, the way that Warframe works. Spawning things in the simulacrum for SARYN are pretty much, like, it's kind of just not how the game is, and that's, like, an important distinction, I would say. Turn this on, throw this out, do this. Your 4 is a stun, but enemies that are affected by Overguard obviously won't do that. The 4 stun is lengthened by Gloom. Obviously, just using a good weapon like the Ignis here, especially with her 3, which is a huge damage buff that gives you tons of toxin procs, is great. Like, these enemies, I mean, these are non-Steel Path enemies. They're similar tankiness, but, like, whenever you're actually shooting them with a weapon like the Ignis, they don't really stand any kind of a chance at all. So, yeah. That's what SARYN's up to. The Ignis build that I love to use with SARYN is this one. Very normal things are happening with this. This is still bugged, so Primary Merciless and the stacks on Chamber and the stacks on Aptitude don't usually work right now. Hopefully there's a fix for that soon. But the gameplay that you're going to see is with that bug in place, and life doesn't seem so hard if you're SARYN. So yeah, that's what's up with SARYN. Also, because I know people are going to ask, this is using the Void Shell. I'm just going to show all of the stuff I'm using here. These are default emissive and energy colors. And then, like, color-wise, we're using this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then all of the attachment pieces, this is the Kukri armor and the Vengeful Toxin ephemera, and so on and so forth. These are just copied over from the main. It's just default colors. But yeah, that's what's going on with SARYN. She's an absolute murder horse. Anyway, enjoy the Steel Path video, and I'll see you tomorrow. Time to hit the record button for YouTube. Oh, man. Let's kill everyone with SARYN. That's what's going on here. Oh yeah, perfect SARYN music, honestly.
Scans show Grenier are harvesting Kuva nearby. Set off the alarms to draw them out, then steal their Kuva catalysts. Predictable. As expected, Grenier have shut down the environmental systems, sending modified life support capsules. Use these to sustain your environment or attach Kuva catalysts to begin harvesting.
Okay. Oh, am I doing that thing where I'm getting too aggressive before all enough enemies spawn? Also, one of the things you're going to have to do as SARYN is you're going to kind of have to chase life support around because enemies will die very, very far away from you. Yeah, most enemies like are not really going to get much of a chance to even like hurt me, if I'm honest. Yeah, slash procs doesn't matter. They don't do my full EHP. So whenever my one ticks, then they just get fucked. We also have shield gating. If we're going to be hit particularly hard, we can just do that. You can just see the health deplete, then refill the max. Glorious, yeah. Yeah, that's why, like, I mean, whenever you use this without Energize, then, like, Hunter Adrenaline just assures that, like, an enemy will shoot you, and you'll be like, haha, I'm at max energy. Isn't that nice? And then just doing Ignis Wraith things. Ignis plus SARYN, like, yeah. Super long and like just go, yeah, not here. But we'll hit like 3 tiles worth of enemies with that because our range is so high. I'll just go this way. Everyone in that direction is going to die. So for those that like don't know like mechanically how SARYN stuff works, like, if you don't know, whenever you use her 4, any enemy that has her 1 on them becomes as if you had cast the 1 on them directly. And what that means is that they're a host. That means that no matter how they die, they will spread the 1. So if you leave an area with a bunch of hosts and a bunch of enemies spawn there, and then those hosts die, all the new enemies become hosts.
Prepare for life support.
But they won't, whenever they die, if they die to just the 1, they will not continue to spread it. Which is why it's nice to have really strong enemies like Eximus have your 1 on them. Because they'll die later, and it'll catch like 2 waves of enemies spawning in. So like, once again, as is usually the case with SARYN, they nerfed something and it made SARYN stronger. Is there a difference between regular glaive and glaive prime? Yeah, glaive prime has an innate slash proc, making it the best glaive in the game. But yeah, like, all I'm really doing, like, what I'm doing as SARYN is I'm not fighting the enemies. I am gardening. Like, that is what SARYN is doing. I am grooming my one. And it's going to kill them all. And like that's the play style of SARYN. You're trying to make sure your garden doesn't die. And here we see the only problem to SARYN's general efficiency is the lack of 1,000 enemies in every single room. Yeah, you're not wrong. Wow, he's got spores. Yeah, you're dead too, bud. Anyway, I'll just leave him there. I'll go back for his stuff whenever he's dead. Sorry, man. You caught spores. Also, there's so much air over here. And this is what I mean by, like, enemies will just, like, die at, like, extreme ranges. So you have to, like, really be careful. Yeah, Malice is annoying, so, like, just put spores on him and then be like, deuces.
Our operative is making progress. This will help our cause. When you are ready, go to extraction.
Also, my one is getting to, like, the 2 strong point, where I'm gonna have to start casting it more, and also just kind of, like, leaving it in spots. Because your one still will, like, rack up to being too strong, and you'll, like, lose out on hosts. Like, you can see, like, whenever, like, it cascades out now, it's, like, instantly killing all, like, the really weak dudes. So I'm running into groups that, like, actually don't have spores. Also, someone mentioned it in chat earlier, and I forget who it was. I'm sure you're still in chat. Whoever wanted to mention that, like, SARYN and the way that she is played with this build is literally like the Black Plague, where eventually it was too strong and there were, like, people that survived because everyone who got it died. Like, that's, like, legitimately how this build works, is just absolutely Black Plaguing the entire map. And you can't die because enemies aren't going to do your shield gate and then your entire EHP, which is what they would have to do in order to kill you. Pretty elegant design, actually. Spore damage is self-limiting enemy level. Yeah. Very good. And you can, like, I can just, like, no, like, I wasn't even looking at that. I can just, like, no fear dive, because as long as my one is affecting some enemies, I'm healing for everything I could possibly ever heal. Yeah, and, like, as enemies get stronger, so will this. And infected, 20 infected. That should cascade back far enough. But you mean that SARYN's one heals by a Gloom? Today I learned may need to pull SARYN out again. Oh, yeah. Well, because Gloom does not heal you based on enemies in its range. Gloom just gives you lifesteal. So even if you have, like, a no-range Gloom, it will still give you lifesteal. What? I had no idea. Most people don't, because, like, usually you run Gloom with range, right? But you really don't have to. Like, if the lifesteal's, like, the only important part... Like, obviously, SARYN just also runs the range. Also, we're not even... Like, Gloom is at full power right now because we have, like, Augmented up. So, like, we could absolutely... Violence. Yes, the power of incredible violence. Anyway, you're dead. Ooh. There we go. He turned off my abilities. What a dickhead. Don't be invincible. You're slowed. Okay, now we're on full power Gloom because he made me reset it. Now I have the ultimate in slowing technology also applied. Are you dead yet? There we go. And we have, like, just tons of oxygen everywhere we look. Like, I mean, we're doing just fine. Like, violence, it purge your spores off itself. Yeah, it seems that way. Weird bug. Only 7 infected. Where is everyone? Oh, right, they're dead. All right, well, anyway. That's just doing SARYN things. Just a bit of gardening. Is her 4 just damage? Her 4 is damage, which doesn't actually really matter. The damage of it is pretty irrelevant. The important part about the 4 is that it is a stun, which can come up, and also is extended by Gloom. And also, it turns enemies into hosts, like prime hosts for her 1, which means when they die, even if they die from her 1, they spread the disease to all enemies around them within range. Yeah, anyway. Also, the test to see if a Warframe is has a good kill rate is if they can do 100 kills per minute in this mission. That's generally where I like to be. SARYN does 1,300 kills, and she's trying not to kill everything too fast. Like, trying her bestest. Also, this, just so we're clear, anyone who's watching on the YouTube, this is still with the bug that my weapon is way less strong. Yeah. That's good. We love being SARYN. Love my new fashion for SARYN, too.